Okay, before we begin, I just wanna say, I was not expecting last week's video to get this many views. Holy crap. Before I uploaded that video, I had 1440 subscribers. But now, I have over 1500 subs. All because of this one video that I didn't really put that much effort in. I mean, seriously. The last time I experienced this kind of popularity was with my Super Y video from over a year ago. That is amazing. Okay, now onto the video. So yeah, the PJ Masks Season 6 review was originally gonna be a 5-part series, but I've decided to shorten it to 3 parts. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to talk about another superhero kids show called Kia and the Kimoha Heroes. So next week, we'll talk about that show, and the week after that, we'll get to my overall thoughts on PJ Masks Power Heroes. Oh, and spoiler alert, Kia and the Kimoha Heroes is a really underrated show, and not gonna lie, it might just be better than PJ Masks, I don't know, stay tuned to find out. You'd be surprised at how hard this list was to make. This season was filled with so many bad, stupid, and just plain boring episodes, that I could have easily made a top 10 list. With that being said, not every episode was downright garbage. So, without further ado, let's begin. Anyu is one of my favorite characters in the show. I loved seeing her go from an antisocial, serious, and no-nonsense superhero to a kind-hearted, and fun-loving girl who's willing to let people in her life. It's one of my favorite character arcs in the show. But in this episode, her character development got completely reset. And it really rubbed me the wrong way. Also, this episode just copies the plot from the episode, Catboy Squared. Basically, what happens is, Romeo rebuilds his multiplier ray to create an army of labs to take over the world, and it's up to Anyu to stop him. Gecko wants to help her, but Anyu decides to do it all by herself. Didn't we already do this back in Season 3? What happened to her character arc? Why is she suddenly unwilling to let people help her? And then Gecko gets multiplied, so Anyu sends them on fake missions so she can deal with Romeo alone. Why? This is the definition of character assassination. This is just baffling. Did the writers forget her character arc? Also, I really do not like the change they made to her. Before this season, Anyu could only use her powers on Mystery Mountain, and she was completely powerless in the city. But in this season, suddenly, she can just use her powers wherever she goes. Ignoring the fact that this had absolutely zero build-up whatsoever, it just makes Anyu a lot less interesting. When she couldn't use her powers in the city, she had to improvise. That gave her a weakness, and that made her more relatable. But now that she can just use her powers wherever she goes, all that relatability is gone. I wouldn't mind this if she'd gradually earned this ability over time, but no, it just comes out of nowhere. Look, I get it, she needs to have powers in the city, otherwise, she can't help the PJ Masks, but at least give her some sort of weakness. Let's move on. This episode introduces Bastet, the Sun Cat. And I really like her as a character. She has a fun dynamic with Catboy, and they work off each other well. In this episode, Bastet gets summoned into the city, and Catboy assumes she's a new villain. So, Bastet is basically the opposite of a twist villain. We're meant to assume she's a bad guy, but in the end, it turns out that she's trying to defeat Pharaoh Boy, arguably the most powerful villain in this whole franchise. And while I was expecting her to be a good guy because she was in the promos, so the suspense is kind of ruined, but other than that, it was a good twist. There is one thing that confused me though. How did Bastet get summoned to the city? It couldn't have been Pharaoh Boy. The episode implies that she was summoned by magic, but who summoned her? Outside of that, this was a pretty fun episode. In this episode, Gloop the Third comes to Gloop, Octobella's moat. And yes, Gloop the Third is a new character introduced this season. And I'm just gonna say it right now. I really don't like him, but that's for another video. Anyways, Gecko tries to stop Gloop, but Octobella constantly teases him for no reason. Even when he's trying to save her moat. Jesus, I know she's a villain, but man, is she unlikable in this episode. I already have very mixed feelings on Octobella as a character, but this episode made me hate her. This whole time, Gecko is desperately trying to save her moat, but she just keeps treating him like garbage, and it honestly kind of hurts to watch. At one point, Gecko gets glooped by Gloop, Jesus, that's a dumb name, and Octobella just kicks him into a garbage can. Oh my god, there was supposed to be a message in this episode, right? Actually, there is. This episode teaches that heroes are supposed to help everybody, even when they aren't nice to us. And, I get this message, but can you at least make Octobella a little bit grateful for the guy trying to save her? In the end, they do decide to work together to stop Gloop, but it doesn't make up for Octobella's cruelty. And the worst part is, she faces little to no repercussions for her actions. I think this would have been better if Octobella was the one who got glooped, and Gecko would be forced to save her. That would have been a better way to get the message across. Overall, this episode sucks. Let's move on. I don't think I've ever had a PJ Masks episode make me laugh as much as this one. So basically, Pirate Robot uses a pirate crystal to hypnotize Olet, Gecko, and Lilyfae into becoming his servants. I actually really like Pirate Robot as a character. He's not exactly a villain, but he's not exactly a good guy either. It makes for a really interesting character. I really like how when the heroes get hypnotized, they become these really selfish pirates who don't even care about each other. In fact, they just outright betray Pirate Robot the first chance they get. It's so hilarious to watch. Not much to say about this one, it's just a really funny episode. I don't usually do dishonorable mentions, but this season had so many bad episodes, that it makes me wish I did a top 10. But here are some dishonorable mentions. Firstly, Iceworld. This is one of the most forgettable episodes I've ever seen. I just watched this episode before making this video, yet I can't remember anything about it. I guess it does give Ice Cub some character development which he desperately needed, but this episode was just boring to watch. Secondly, Moth Boy. This episode marks Armadilon's grand return after a full season of absence. I'm not kidding. He was nowhere to be seen in Season 5. And does this episode do him justice? No, it does not. Seriously, he's been gone for a whole season, and this is the episode he gets. A boring, filler episode where he tries to become a moth-themed superhero because he has self-doubts. And he gets a new power out of nowhere which is never used again, making this whole episode a waste of time. Look, I appreciate the writers trying to develop his character more, but this isn't the way to do it. And finally, Catboy does it all. The conflict of this episode is so stupid. Catboy has trouble leading this big team, even though he's never had trouble with that before, but whatever gets the plot going, I guess. This episode feels like it should have came out way sooner. Also, why were all the heroes going after Romeo? Usually during a mission, the power heroes would only send out 2 or 3 heroes at a time. That would have made things so much easier. And later in the episode, Catboy gets captured by Romeo and forced to run on a treadmill to power his lab. But, can't he just jump off the treadmill? There's nothing stopping him from just jumping off. I don't usually question the character's logic in a story unless it heavily affects their character, but this episode just makes everyone look stupid. And now, time for the number ones. Now, even though this is the worst episode of Season 6, for the most part, the episode isn't really that bad. But the reason this episode's on this list, is because of the ending. The ending, is one of the most baffling, nonsensical, and just plain lazily written endings I've ever seen. It is so bad, that it effectively ruined this whole episode. So, let's tear this crap apart. So, in this episode, it turns out that Armadilon has an evil clone. No, I'm not joking. Armadilon has an evil clone from 1,000 years ago named Armadretto. This has to be the dumbest, most fanfiction-y bullcrap this show has ever done. So then, Bastet assumes that Armadilon is Armadretto, so she has to learn to trust him to stop Pharaoh Boy. And, you know, it's actually not half bad. Until the ending. You wanna know what happens during the ending? I'll play it for you and see if you can guess why I hate it so much.
I'm very happy to have you on our PJ Power Hero team, friend.
Thanks a lot, little cat buddy. But I think it's best if I keep working alone. I'm more of a lone armadillo type hero. But any anytime you guys need me, I'll be there. You can count on it.
So, did you figure it out? After a full season of being nowhere in sight, and barely even being in this season, Armadillan quits being a power hero. Why? Why in the world would the writers do this? Why would they put Armadillan in the new intro, give him a new power, only for him to just quit being a power hero in the end? What was even the point of Moth Boy, if his character development isn't gonna matter in the end? I am now fully convinced that the writers of the show hate Armadillan. I mean, why else would they do this? The worst part is, they don't even explain why he decided not to be a power hero. The only explanation we get is, he's a solo hero. Wow. And the cherry on top is, they made a game called PJ Masks Power Heroes, Mighty Alliance, and Armadillan isn't even in it. This episode isn't just disappointing, it feels like a betrayal of the character. Instead of giving Armadillan the hero arc he deserved, they opted for a cheap twist that erases all his progress. It's easily the most frustrating, poorly executed ending in the entire series. And that's why, this is the worst episode of PJ Masks Power Heroes. The 1-hour-long PJ Masks specials are not really that great. Heroes of the Sky feels like two plot points that don't belong in the same episode. Heroes of the Road is an absolute disappointment. Heroes Everywhere isn't terrible, but it's such a mediocre start to the season, and Heroes of Space has no reason to exist. And because of that, I had very low expectations for Heroes of Iceworld. But surprisingly, this special was actually really good. Like, it might just be one of the best episodes of the whole series. I already talked about this episode in my Ice Cub video, so I'll keep the plot synopsis brief. Romeo steals the ice crystal which holds Ice Cub's powers. So, Ice Cub has to work with Lilyfae to get it back. So, what makes this episode so great? Well, it actually gives Ice Cub some proper character development. Is it enough for me to love him? Not really, but considering that he was such a bland character for the first half of the season, I'll take what I can get. In this episode, you can really feel his struggle to work with Lilyfae, considering how much she barely pays attention. Eventually, it gets to the point where he lashes out at her. And it doesn't feel out of nowhere, it had good build-up. They obviously make up in the end, because we can't have a preschool show without a lesson about friendship. But overall, this was a great episode for Ice Cub. It's not A+ writing, and Ice Cub doesn't get any more great moments for the rest of the season, but compared to the rest of the episodes, it's amazing. And that, my friends, concludes the list. Overall, it was really hard to find good episodes this season. Sure, there were a few other good episodes like The Sun Factory, Basted by the Book, or Romovision. But most of them were just plain boring. Anyways, see you next week when we talk about something that I actually like. But until then, party on.